so much again for those of you who have joined us here to have a wonderful session with the inimitable Julia Ham, President and CEO, flag bearer of all things utility and grid integration for this wonderful industry that we all herald, which is clean energy. Going to come on in just a moment. Just wanted to thank you so much for joining us. We'll be bringing Julia live in just a moment. And so grateful that if you're joining us from wherever you are, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, YouTube, we're super happy that you're sharing Earth Day together with us here on this 50th anniversary of Earth Day. We're just wrapping up our session with Andrew Birch and Adam Browning over in the first session of the day. For those of you, we're going to wait just a second for those who might be jumping into this session along with me, rushing over, as it were, from one conference room to the other. So super grateful that everyone is joining us today for this session. We'll get going in just a moment. Are live again here for session number 2. We're 4 minutes into this broadcast already, so thank you for your patience. If you jumped in wondering what's going on, if you are unfamiliar, we are running a virtual summit right now. It's called Suncast Clean Energy Summit. You can register for any of the other wonderful sessions we have scheduled for today. If you're just tuning in, you missed an absolutely stunning session with Andrew Birch and Adam Browning from Open Solar and Vote Solar, looking at the impact of clean energy and innovation on society. We're about to jump in here with the president and CEO of the Smart Electric Power Alliance and I think 3-time Suncast podcast guest, Ms. Julia Ham. Julia has been with the Solar Electric Power Alliance, SEPA, as it is known colloquially in the industry, for quite some time. We go deep into her story on episodes that we've done on our podcast, Suncast. If you're unfamiliar, Suncast is a podcast that curates and presents the thought leaders of our industry at an executive level and also at the grassroots front line to give you tips and insights into how to add to your toolkit, grow your personal, professional career, or maybe your business as an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur. And I want to go ahead and bring Julia into the stream now. Julia, so good to see you. I'm going to hit the unmute here just so you don't have to worry about that.
Thanks. Hi, Nico. Good to see you.
It's been a little while. I feel like somehow this month, we were supposed to see each other in DC a month ago. I feel like this month turned into 10 years. So,
yeah.
Well, this is super exciting, and I know that you have this is your domain expertise. I mean, really, fundamentally, what we are thinking about on this Earth Day is how is clean energy impacting society in such a way that we see this transformation, not only over the last 50 years with the cost reductions of solar and now energy storage and other types of renewables, but the changing paradigm of the business model of how electricity is generated, distributed, transmitted, how it is, how we charge for it, whether or not we charge for it. So I think it's a really interesting dynamic. I feel no one really has the domain authority that you do on the way that the traditional utility side of the business is thinking about it. So we want to invite you and welcome you to spend the next 20 minutes with us. We're going to talk about how utilities are adapting to the change that we have before us and how we're going to get to effectively a zero carbon economy by 2050, or a zero carbon grid rather. So you said you have a presentation that you want to share.
I do. Yep, I can bring that up now.
Fantastic. And if you hit share screen, I'll see it pop up, and then I'll put it up on the screen for you. There we go. 2. I don't know. If it's, well, actually, here I'll ask Alex, or maybe if you're in the chat, if you're watching us on Crowdcast, if you're watching us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, please let us know if Julia's image is showing up properly so that we can address if it is not. All right. John, like it is showing up properly. I've tried a couple of times here. I'm still learning the technology. I'm going to try to see if I can solo you on the screen. So I think what that means is I have to remove myself from the stream. In the meantime, you can go ahead and begin the presentation, and I will jump back in as you wrap up for some Q&A. And I definitely, as we were just leaving with Bertie and Adam, I have some questions from them that I'll drop in to the conversation as well.
Okay, great. All right, I guess I'll take it from here. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. For any of you who were at North America Smart Energy Week last September, which includes the flagship brands of Solar Power International and Energy Storage International, as well as a number of other verticals within the show that we do together with SIA, some of what I'm going to talk about today may sound familiar, as it's really built upon some of the remarks that I made in the opening general session last year, but going into quite a bit more detail. So last year was a really big milestone for my career. I started working at SIPA back in 1999. So last year marked the 20-year anniversary of when I started working with the organization. And it's really fascinating to reflect back on what has changed over the course of those 20 years. And in fact, when I started at SIPA, it wasn't even called SIPA, and it's had multiple names since then. But back then, when it was founded in 1992, before I joined in 1999, it was originally the Utility Photovoltaic Group. It later in 2000 became the Solar Electric Power Association, which was the version 1.0 of the SIPA acronym. And then in the 2015-2016 timeframe, we expanded our mission, we rebranded and became who we are today, the Smart Electric Power Alliance, version 2.0 of the SIPA acronym. And so, again, it's really interesting to look back on what's happened, not just within SIPA as an organization, but the industry over that 20-year course of time. This chart is from the Energy Information Administration, and as you'll see, back in 1999, when I started in the industry, wind and solar didn't even show up on the chart for US energy production. Also back in 1999, there was no meaningful US grid-connected solar industry. The market really was, there was some off-grid, there were some pilots, but there was no grid-connected solar market here in the US. A huge solar system, a huge PV system back in 1999, 50 kilowatts maybe, maybe that's even overestimating, but the idea of projects that were in any sort of megawatt style count versus kilowatts was completely unheard of at that point. The average cost back then nationwide of a residential PV system was well over $10 a watt. Battery storage was only for off-grid projects, and wind was still a very small part of the mix in the US with just 2.5 gigawatts of capacity. But back then, yeah.
To jump in here, but I just realized that the screen seems like it's very zoomed in. We can see kind of what looks like the top right.
Oh, really?
I don't know if there's a way to maybe reset the screen. There we go. Actually, we can see it now, but apparently when you go full screen, it's going to show everything as a portion of the screen, but I'm not sure why.
That is, let me try to go full screen one more time and tell me if you still have the same issue. Let's see. Or if you want to, let's see. Still having the same problem?
Way zoomed in.
Yeah.
I wonder if the other option, which is to show it instead of full screen, it just shows the.
Yeah, we can do that. Ruins my animation, but we can go with the flow here. Sure, that's fine. We could just keep that. Let's see if we can minimize the, let's see.
It worked earlier when we tried it out, so.
Yep, okay. All right, we'll just do that. Okay. Okay, so anyway, so.
Maybe to put it into reading view, the one that's just to the left of presentation view, I wonder if that would.
No, I just lost it.
Still seeing sort of and everything. So let's see if that.
Oh, yeah. that works. There we go. All right.
Works. There we go.
That does work. Perfect. All right. I'll pick right back up where I left off. So I was reflecting on the things that were in 1999, but now we're going to fast forward, zoom to today. And these are all things that all of you know, right? Today, wind and solar are in many parts of the US and the world, the lowest cost resources. Energy storage is a real viable option in many applications. We've hit the 100 gigawatt milestone of wind capacity in the US. We're seeing rapid declines in the amount of coal that's being used domestically, while we're seeing rapid increases in the use of renewables. And climate change is really now in the public spotlight. So much has changed since I started in the industry 20 years ago. In addition to the hat I wear as the CEO of SEPA, I also serve as the board chair of an organization which we call CELI, the Clean Energy Leadership Institute. And CELI is focused on helping prepare the new kind of energy leader that we need to get to this carbon-free energy future. And in 2018, I was talking at their annual meeting to a group of a few hundred young professionals. And how I put it to them was that they are not the future leaders of the clean energy industry. In fact, they are the future leaders of the energy industry, which will be clean. And I think that's a really important distinction, because we're getting to the point where clean energy, renewable energy, it's not alternative anymore. We should really drop the word alternative from our lexicon. Clean energy, renewable energy are becoming the standard. They are what this industry, what the energy industry is now all about. So in terms of SEPA and what we're doing, very consistent with the conversation for those of you who joined the previous session with Adam Browning, and Adam was talking about all of the states that are making commitments to carbon-free energy. SEPA's vision is also for a carbon-free energy system by 2050. We're focused on getting there by facilitating a smart, intentional transition to a clean and modern grid. And what that means is that we're being thoughtful about decisions. Every decision has trade-offs. And so making sure we're understanding the trade-offs of every decision that's being made along the way, making sure that all customers still have access to affordable and reliable electricity, but that it is also clean at the same time. And that's not always an easy thing to accomplish. So switching gears to talk now about what utilities are doing. I talk about SEPA's vision being a carbon-free energy system by 2050, but we're not the only ones. The logos up on the screen are just a smattering of utilities that have made commitments to either carbon-free or carbon neutral. The first was Xcel Energy, and their target was made public in December of 2018. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But SEPA, once Xcel made their announcement and then others started to quickly follow, we realized that there was a real trend emerging in the industry. So SEPA began tracking publicly utility commitments to carbon reduction. So for anyone who's interested in more about that, you can go to our website and visit our carbon reduction tracker, which allows you to scroll over the service territories here domestically in the US and see what the commitments are that utilities have made to carbon reduction. Today, we've seen 21 major utilities here in the US that have committed to either carbon-free or net zero goals by either 2050 or in some cases even sooner than that. So those are the utilities that have made commitments, again, sort of to get to zero. But there are many other utilities that have made very significant carbon reduction commitments or set targets for very significant reduction. And if we look at those who have made commitments to get to a 50% reduction or greater in a pretty short time frame. That represents more than 65% of customers in the US. So we're getting to a point very similar to Adam Browning's point earlier about the state commitments. We are seeing equivalent commitments from utilities, both in states where the governor or the legislature has set out goals, but also in many cases in states where the utility is taking the lead and truly making these commitments on a voluntary basis because they believe it's the right thing to do. I wanted to mention, actually today, SEPA is launching a new initiative called the Utility Transformation Challenge. Oops, my slides are automatically advancing. And the Utility Transformation Challenge is starting with a very significant data collection effort, information collection effort from utilities around the country to assess where utilities are in their energy transition and their readiness to get to carbon free. So we are very excited about this. We just launched the survey effort today, and we'll be collecting data over the coming weeks and months from utilities, doing analysis on that data. And then by the time we get to September, in conjunction with North America Smart Energy Week, we will be launching many of the results, snapshot reports, leaderboards, and a lot of really other valuable information about where different utilities are across the US in their transformation, their transition, and as well as trend information looking across the utility sector. I mentioned earlier that Xcel was the first utility that really came out with a meaningful target to get to carbon free. And I want to note that these are not just lofty targets. There are utilities like Xcel that have real meat on the bones in terms of their plan to get there. And Xcel really took a leadership role by being willing to go first. And they are serious about doing deep analysis to determine what they need to do in order to get to 100% carbon free. Now, they're confident that right now, they have great confidence that they can get to 80% with existing technologies. There's a real question around how they get from that 80% to 100%. And for Xcel is a very fortunate company in that the region of the country that it serves across multiple states and in the Midwest, Xcel's service territories have very good wind and solar resources. There are other utilities that may have really good solar resource, but not so good on wind, or really good on wind, but not so good on solar. Those utilities might have a bigger delta. You know, it might be easy for them to get to 60%, 70%, but then they have questions around a larger portion. But for Xcel and many other utilities who have both good wind and solar resource, getting to 80% there's a very clear path on how to do that. Just a couple of other examples of utilities that have made meaningful commitments and really put very specific details to tangible next steps on how to get there. I wanted to highlight in particular Arizona Public Service. They are one of the more recent utility target announcements. APS made their public their commitment to get to carbon free just in January this year. And I know for many folks in the US solar industry know that there has been a lot of controversy over the years with APS and how they've handled the integration of rooftop solar for their customers. But Jeff Goldner, who took over as CEO last December, came in and very quickly got the company everything aligned to be able to make this commitment. And they have interim goals for 2030. They're going to get to 65% clean energy by 2030, and that will include 45% renewable penetration. And they're confident that they can do that. They're making commitments to close all of their coal plants. The last coal plant in Arizona Public Service Territory will be closed by 2031. And in terms of their integrated resource plan, which will have far more details about how they're going to get there, is in the process of being filed. I also wanted to note Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association. For those who are not very familiar with the utility world, for rural electric cooperatives, many of them don't own their own generation. They often belong to a G&T, a Generation and Transmission Association, that owns both the generation and transmission, as you might deduce from the name of what they're called. So Tri-State is headquartered in Colorado, and again, is thought of as a very traditional conservative utility organization. But they have laid out a very robust transition plan with an interim 2024 goal of getting to 50% renewable penetration. Again, they're fortunate. They have a lot of both wind and solar, a good resource for wind and solar in the area in which they operate and for the co-ops that they serve across the Midwest and Southwest. They're retiring their coal plants in New Mexico and Colorado. And again, there's real meat on the bones behind the commitments that organizations like Tri-State are meeting. And the photo of the gentleman up here, Dwayne Hiley. Dwayne is Tri-State's new CEO, like APS. This organization has a new CEO. Dwayne has been acting in the CEO role since just about a year ago, March or April of 2019. And so I put the pictures of Jeff and Dwayne up here just to demonstrate how important leadership from the top is in order to ensure that we make the progress that we need to have. We need leaders within the utilities who see why this has to happen. They see how it has to happen, rather than simply being mandated to do so by either their governor or the legislature or any other policymaker. So how is SEPA supporting all of these utilities across the industry who are working towards a carbon-free energy future? And I should say, we're not just working with utilities. So SEPA really is a large umbrella membership organization. We have over 725 utility members, so almost all of the investor-owned utilities, hundreds of municipal utilities, hundreds of co-op utilities. But we also have 70% of the state public utility commissions that are members. We have hundreds of technology companies, be it project developers, product manufacturers, other service providers, and technology companies who are members. So we work with the whole industry to figure out how to find win-win strategies to move all of this forward. And our work with all of these players is focused on 4 pathways. We're focused on utility business models, regulatory innovation, grid integration, and transportation electrification. So I want to use the rest of my time just to talk briefly about each of those in a little bit more detail. So for utility business models, we do believe that utilities are key to the energy system of the future, but it can't be the status quo. We're going to have to see evolution to utility business models. Utilities are going to be playing different roles than they've played in the past. They need to find different ways to earn money than they have in the past. But equally as important is that they can't do it alone. This is going to have to be a partnership between utilities and partners, be it technology companies, customers, and others. And while I know that the chart up on the screen is hard to read, that's okay. It's just intended to demonstrate that this is pretty complex stuff. So the example up here relates to microgrids, and just acknowledging that there are multiple different models for how microgrids can be deployed, where the utility, the technology company, and the customer all have different roles that they can play, and there's sort of different levels and degree of control that the utility has versus the customer has. There's different ownership models. And so it really is quite complicated and not sort of an easy solution in terms of what this evolution needs to look like. And it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all business model as we go forward. There are going to be utilities with different business models, different arrangements with partners and customers. On the regulatory front, this slide is not specific to the energy industry. This is just showing generally the speed of change and how much faster change is happening from a technology standpoint, and how it will continue to do so as we go forward. And so when we take that and think about it in terms of the construct of state regulation for the utility industry, it is very challenging. Regulation was set up 100 plus years ago in a situation when there were large central station power plants. The power was delivered from a plant to a customer, and it was very simple. But today, we all know that it has changed drastically, and it is hard to keep up. Now, as we as SEPA are thinking about these issues, we recognize that all 50 states truly are unique, but that there are common challenges that they have when it comes to regulatory innovation. So for the past little over a year, we've been working on an initiative called Renovate, and had a task force of commissioners, consumer advocates, utilities, technology companies, and legislators who all came together to identify what are some of these common challenges. And they break down to people and knowledge, managing the increased rate of change, managing risk and uncertainty, and the complexity of objectives. And there's a lot more detail I could go into, but unfortunately we don't have a lot of time to be able to do that today. But really just beginning to think about what are some of the solutions that are available. So we've issued a solution set document that addresses potential solutions to each of these 4 challenges. Last piece on regulatory innovation, I'm coming back to the microgrid example just to show how complex it is to think through regulation for things that are sort of outside the norm of what's been done in the industry. And microgrids are actually one of the more complex. Our team worked over the past couple of years with the DC Public Service Commission and spent a lot of time thinking about what is the right regulatory treatment for microgrids. Very complicated and complex stuff. Moving on to the third pathway, which is grid integration, we're really focused on reducing the friction points in grid modernization to ensure that we can accelerate the rate of adoption of clean energy. So, this relates to both distributed energy resources and large utility scale projects. Both are equally important to our future. They have very different friction points. The 2 charts I have up on the screen right now both happen to be examples from the DER space. But the first on the left is just showing a survey we did of utilities a number of months back, asking them what the biggest grid integration challenges were related to DER. And then also just recognizing on the right that we can't simply put all DER into the same bucket. Different types of DER have different attributes, they have different characteristics, they provide different value to the grid. And so we really have to be thoughtful about understanding each one of those and understanding how they both create opportunities in many cases and challenges in other cases to the grid, and thinking about how to solve for those both on a resource by resource basis, but more importantly, collectively as a suite of technologies and resources that are supporting the system. The other point on grid integration is the importance of reducing friction by making sure we have the right standards, processes, and frameworks in place. The chart up on the screen right now, simply on the sort of linear path, shows the way that typically traditional system planning has happened within utilities. Again, very linear. There was a role for stakeholder engagement that sort of came at the end of the process. And we're moving to this more circular, much more engaged stakeholder process in order to make sure that we're getting input from all the right places. Now, as you all know, I'm sure, who are listening, it used to be that utilities were the decision makers for pretty much everything that was happening on the grid, and that made it easy to plan. But today, now customers and third parties and other solution providers have all sorts of decisions that they can be making. And so we need to make sure that there's transparency and visibility in both directions in order to make sure that we're making the right investment decisions for the grid. Moving on quickly to transportation electrification, we think there's a huge opportunity here. Obviously, what's happening with COVID-19 right now is sort of potentially slowing things down a bit, but I believe there's no doubt that the wave of transportation electrification is in our future. Lots of different forecasts on how fast that's going to happen, and it is going to happen at a different pace in different parts of the country and different parts of the world, but it will happen. one of the things that we're spending a lot of time thinking about is making sure that we are going through the sort of evolution of the adoption of EVs very intentionally to be prepared to use EVs as grid assets. So we need to make sure that EVs can interact with the grid, that essentially we can use the cars as batteries on wheels, to ensure that everybody isn't plugging in at the same time and causing a problem for the grid, but instead we can essentially use the fleet of EVs as a demand response resource, and they can actually be very helpful to the grid if done appropriately. So our team is spending a lot of time working on these issues. So I just want to wrap up by saying, you know, as I said, I've been in the industry 20 years, over 20 years now. And this quote from Bill Gates really resonates with me because it is very consistent with what I have witnessed. And his quote is that we always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. So, I think that's very true. It's played out quite consistently over the 20 years that I've been watching what's happened. So I am excited for what the future holds. I am extremely excited that we're beginning to see this real consensus and people coming together around the idea of, yes, we need to get to carbon free. Yes, 2050 is the right target, although some places can get there sooner. But it just really excites me about what the future holds. And I look forward to continuing to work with all of you to make that happen. Nico, I think I'm at the end there.
Yeah. What an awesome opportunity we have. You know, it's been I'm going to go ahead and remove the slide here.
Thanks.
It's been a long journey for us. Obviously, you've got a couple of decades at the helm here, helping utilities and their stakeholders really figure out how clean energy is an opportunity for them, an opportunity to innovate, an opportunity to embrace the feedback they receive from their stakeholders. And it's going to be very exciting. I was really glad to see the Utility Transformation Challenge launching today. I will be certain to share the results of that with our audience as they come out. When do you anticipate that we'll be able to see some of the fruit of the Transformation Challenge?
September. So there'll be a number of different products that come out of the sort of data collection effort, but September will be the sort of the first release of some of the analysis.
I apologize that we are a little bit over. Obviously, started a couple of minutes after the half hour for this one. What I think I want to do here is, because this is a part of a larger summit, and folks will have access, those who have registered at suncastsummit.com will have access to all of the sessions as they roll out. I think that it would be prudent for us to maybe do a follow-up where you and I can answer some of the questions that did come in during the set. This was meant to be for a half hour, and with the technical difficulties, I apologize. We are going to have to jump off to our next session. That notwithstanding, this was really insightful, and I hope that our audience, I saw some comments that our audience really enjoyed and have questions to follow up with you. So we'll collate and curate those questions for you. You and I can do a session where we'll answer those questions, and we'll post them here for those who are also following along the summit to watch. If you're following along with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, we would invite you to go to suncastsummit.com and register. We are running 3 weeks concurrently every Wednesday for the next 3 weeks. Today is on impact of clean energy. Next Wednesday is the innovation around the clean energy economy. And then we'll do a separate summit on the 6th of May around Latin America and what is happening in the rest of the Americas, as it were. So, Julia, with that, I would like to bid you farewell and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to spend with us.
Thank you, Nico. Talk to you soon.
Joining as well, and please go look for us in the next session with Dr. Laura Stachel, the founder of We Care Solar. I'm going to head there right now, so see you soon.